But I'm going to hand over to Patrik to talk about toxic developers and you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming and seeing my presentation on toxic developers and you. And I have to quickly acknowledge Will's talk for leading into my talk about the team mentality and how to build great teams. So that definitely goes well with my presentation, hopefully. First things first, I don't work in HR. I am not a team lead or a manager of some sort. I haven't studied behavioral science, and I'm not a mental health specialist. I'm also not perfect. Here's what I am, though. I'm a front-end web developer that deeply cares about a good workplace culture in order to go to work happy. Recently, I reflected on my career of 10 years plus in web development, and when I did that, I kind of realized there's always been one. Each workplace I've been at had a toxic developer, be it in the form of a fellow team member or even a superior. Based on my personal experiences, I would like to share my learnings with you today. What is a toxic developer? Oh, sorry, one too far. I'm missing a slide. I'm missing a slide. What? How is this possible? I'm so sorry. Anyway, my aim is to raise awareness of toxic behavior in the workplace and the impact it has on you and your work. That threw me off now, sorry. What is a toxic developer? Let's continue. Toxicity by definition means the quality, state, or relative degree of something being poisonous. But there are actually a lot of different traits a toxic developer can have, and some of them actually might surprise you. Let's explore a few of them. As you can see, there are a lot of different traits on here, and collectively, we could actually think of many more, I'm sure. But what I would like to highlight is that any of these traits individually and in small doses does not necessarily make a toxic developer. However, someone who exhibits many of these traits or to extreme levels might have a more toxic effect on others. Given this, we have learned that toxic developers come in all shapes and sizes. To expand on this a little bit, I would like to introduce you to some of them. First person I would like to introduce you to is Alice. Alice is missing regularly. Come Monday morning, you can almost bet that there will be an email in your inbox from Alice saying, hey, I won't be in today. And when Alice is in and you walk past her desk, you don't see a code editor. There's nothing related to work. There's like a browser open with social media or any kind of chat program. Clearly, Alice is not working as hard as everyone else in the office. Yet, when it comes to opinions, Alice has always something to say about what's going on in the office, even though it might not be her responsibility. However, when it comes to delivering the actual piece of work, Alice isn't there. Imagine this going on for week after week after week and nothing changes. Clearly, you might find that Alice's lack of motivation starts to mess with your own motivation. The second person is Bob. Bob does an amazing job at pointing out and finding even the most minor negative things in someone's code on a merge request or a pull request. Even though you know that this person who's putting up the pull request is still learning. And Bob rarely offers any actual real constructive feedback or pointers towards resources and documentation to learn and to improve for that person who's still learning. Over time, some people may actually become scared of putting up pull requests because they're afraid of the backlash that could occur, like comments raining down on them. It's like, oh, you're doing this wrong, that wrong. When discussing work, Bob doesn't like to hear other people's ideas. He likes to push his own ideas forward. If a project doesn't go the way or in the direction that Bob likes, he may actually stop contributing or becomes emotional about it. And yet, you notice that Bob doesn't seem to treat everyone the same. It depends whether or not they agree with him. Last but not least, Charlie. Charlie is a manager. When you have a meeting with Charlie, you share and want to share your ideas with Charlie of how to improve the project that you're working on. You find that Charlie is dismissive and doesn't want to hear you out. Your ideas are too hard to implement or just not going to work, he thinks. But a week later, when you find out that Charlie had a meeting with his bosses and he clearly has sold your ideas as his own, suddenly he gets all the praise for the thing that you've come up with. You put it down as a once-off, but then you learn over time that it's actually the fact that Charlie has done this time and time again with ideas, other people's ideas in the organization. Now, you're no longer sure if you should be thinking of all this stuff to improve the product that you're working on. Like, should I spend time thinking of different approaches or how to fix things? As you can see, a lot of these traits are quite connected to each other. Before we move on, though, I'd like to mention that I purely chose those names for me to remember them and refer back to them later. It's hard to distinguish between a toxic developer and someone who simply disagrees with you or your team. It's important to acknowledge that people can have bad days, disagreements, or simply don't get well along with each other. Your peers may suffer from social anxiety or are just not good with social interactions. Over time, you will discover that there's a certain pattern, or actually, it's just a once-off situation. So it's super important to remember, difficult developers are not necessarily toxic developers. How are you affected by a toxic developer? When you self-sacrifice, what does that mean? You start changing the way you do things. You start naming things differently in your code. You follow this one person's advice, like, oh, you should be doing this way, even though you have done it the other way for so many years in your career, and this is the only person who has a problem with it suddenly. You try to please that one person. To avoid conflict, and you want to maintain peace, you start avoiding interaction if possible, or you resort to flattery, where you compliment someone, oh, thanks for this input, even though you may not actually mean it. And it actually it could go towards a negative impact on you and your work. And to go on that is that you actually start doubting yourself and your abilities. Like, maybe Bob is right. Maybe I haven't done enough research. Maybe he knows better. Even though I've been in this industry for 10 years, I might be wrong or I am just not good enough. And to continue on that, you may start feeling like quitting. Like, maybe it goes on, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I should go to a different job or find a more suitable job. Or in reverse, where you're like, I just really don't want to deal with that person. I may just quit and find a better job. I just will have nothing to do with that anymore. Your mental health starts deteriorating. And that manifests itself, for example, in trouble sleeping. When you go home after work, you carry all that stuff, and you're thinking about, what did Alice say this morning, or what did Bob say in that pull request today? You're taking it with you to bed, kind of. And that leads to the next day where you're lacking concentration. You're having trouble thinking about solutions. You effectively lose your efficiency. And when you think about driving into work in the morning or public transport, whatever your preferred method of transport is, you suddenly feel fearful. You're thinking about, how long is it going to take until I have to deal with Alice or Bob or Charlie? How long until they have a comment that negatively impacts me? And you feel stressed out, even though there's no clear deadline or any current heavy workload. You just kind of feeling very stressed out. And also, you notice changes in your environment. You imagine a busy lunchroom, you have lunch with your colleagues, you're having a big chat, Bob enters the room, everyone suddenly goes quiet, the conversation fizzles out. everyone starts leaving. Think about your team chat. There's been quiet for a while, a toxic developer puts something toxic, potentially, into the chat. It doesn't even have to be toxic, it's just something, and no one comments on it. No one says anything. Hours pass, a day passes. There's no reactions unless they are prompted to respond. No one wants to interact with them. Think about emails unanswered, meetings kind of weird because no one wants to really talk to anyone's problems, and pull requests unreviewed. Just anything to avoid having to deal with a toxic developer. So people go quiet. Then, if you may have to start the way to change things the way you do stuff. And you notice that in other people, they start tiptoeing around a certain person. You notice that behavior change as well. They want to please a certain person. And the other thing is that people become inconsistent. So a certain person may deal happily with you and is friendly towards you, but then you notice that they're actually treating someone else in the organization differently. Or that a toxic developer treats their team different than your team. There's all kind of ways of people adjusting their behavior. Now, if you are in a managerial lead kind of role, think about what this does to your team and their productivity. It's not really good for a workplace, is it? Whew, that was a heavy section, wasn't it? If you find that certain traits or behaviors could match with what you're doing, there are some good news though. Here's how you can deal with a toxic developer. This third and last section of my talk, when I prepared it, I made it for three kinds of people. The perpetrators, the victims, and the enablers. When I first heard about the concept of an enabler, I was like, what? No. What is an enabler? Let me explain. Enabler is someone who sees toxic behavior and does nothing, a bystander. It's a coworker who jumps on toxic behavior and amplifies their voice and gives them a voice even. It's also a manager who does nothing when issues are reported to them. And that last kind of point is quite important when you consider that by doing nothing, the enabler could become the perpetrator in the eyes of the victims. So my advice is focus your energy on what you can control. Build resilience. Remember your priorities and don't self-sacrifice the things you're doing. Stop. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help your team, doesn't help you, doesn't help your organization. Don't change the way you do things just because of one person's opinion. And think about the way you react to comments or toxic comments, like pull request comments, like, you're doing this wrong, that's wrong, you're wrong. Don't be reactive. And it's easy for our responses to become too emotional rather than logical. So choose your battles wisely and stand your ground when the time is right. Or in other words, know when to let something go and when to make a point. Or push your point, rather. If you see toxic behavior going on, challenge that behavior. Ask questions like, how would you fix something? You can't just say something is broken and everything is bad. How would you fix it? How would you improve something? Ask questions. Don't just let them do whatever they do. And don't become the enabler. That's also very important in challenging that. So don't amplify anyone's voice. And if you have done your research and you have put a piece of work up and a merge request or pull request and people are reviewing it, you've done your research, you've looked at the documentation, you read the manuals, whatever tool you're using, you kind of feel like this is the best I could do, this is the pattern that a lot of people are using, and you still get that toxic comment, like, you're doing the wrong thing, I know better, but there's no links or anything. Find opinion with fact. Post those links. Put them in the merge request. Say, hey, this is what I use. This is what I'm basing my work on. And look, other people have done the same thing as well, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And very important also is stick with your passion. Don't let anyone's insecurity mess with what you're doing. Self-care is key. Focus on yourself and your work. Again, you just really want to think about what you are doing, not what this other person is doing, or in fact, not doing. Surround yourself with mentors, people who might have gone through this themselves. They can uplift you, and they can give you advice or different perspectives of how to do or how to deal with something. And if you know that, sorry, that's this one. And if you know that you have something going on at home, something is going on with the family currently, and you're busy, your head is not in the right space, announce it, let people know. Hey, everyone, I have all this stuff going on at home. I know I'm bringing it to work, but be gentle with me, or I need some time, or I just have this stuff going on. Announce it, set the scene. And you might be surprised that other people actually come up to you and want to support you and help you. Get a good night's sleep while you're waiting for, what am I doing? Allow time for things to change, sorry. It takes time to turn a ship around 180 degrees. Nothing happens fast. And while you're waiting, get a good night's sleep. It's very important for your brain to reset after you go home from work and you process all that stuff that happened during the day. Be a positive influence in your environment. Raise issues with your team lead or manager. They may be able to offer a different perspective or give you advice on how to deal with something as well. And if you see toxic behavior impacting people in your team, support them. Talk to them. Let them know, hey, I saw what's going on. I want to help you. What can I do to help you? Support your teammates. And again, if you see something going on or impacting you, rather than just reading the comment on the merge request and be like, hey, no, you're wrong as well, and jump on this massive argument, don't do that. Just remove misinterpretation by going to that person's desk if you can in the same building. Don't let toxic developers hide behind the screen. Communication is key. These are all ways to improve your situation. Think of your own ways to improve your situation. Your ideas and solutions actually may help other people. Don't expect changes tomorrow, next week, or in a month. It takes time to turn something that's gone bad around. It's hard to change a habit. After all, a toxic developer may still be able to add value to your projects. It's important to have good self-care, manage and monitor your own behaviors, because that's what you actually can control. We can all take responsibility in identifying toxic behavior within our organizations. It's not just HR or management that can do something about them. It's the people that work closest with a toxic developer that are affected the most. When I came across, when I researched for my talk, I came across this awesome quote by Gina Trapani, and I want to read it to you. A lot of blustering, hyperbole, and personal insults magically disappear when you're talking to a real human being instead of dumping vacant thoughts into a glowing box. I found it quite matching. One last thing. I don't mean to create an angry mob by giving this talk. I want to raise awareness, because awareness gives us power, and talking about it makes us feel less alone. So please be nice to each other. And if you want to keep adding comments or adding value to my topic, please use the hashtag ToxicDevs as it's down there in the corner. Thank you very much for your time.